Thank you for this very inspiring speech that we heard. And now we move forward with the agenda to a panel that is actually dedicated to how do we support the development and scaling of social economy. It is a pleasure to be in a setting where I have four speakers, one of them virtually connecting, but three live in the audience, in the venue here. And I'm very pleased that all four are very familiar names and people to me, because in the space of social economy, we have been, I think, focusing on the developments of social economy for quite a while. And as Alexis already mentioned in the introduction keynote, in the beginning, when we started, I think the conversation was more how to do this. How are we going to start this? How are we going to support actually the growth of it? How are we starting social economy? But nowadays, we are here to discuss development, scaling, growth, and maybe even how do we help the whole economy to transform into a more impactful one. So with that I will go into a short introduction of all the speakers. And I just want to remind everyone who is in the room with us, but also online, please do join our panel that I would call more of a talk show. I really would like to see engaged audience, questions, comments, any kind of suggestions. We are all ears. And the easiest way to do it would be to ask you questions through Slido, but for people who are with us in the venue, we have microphones roaming around, so if you want, raise your hand. We would love to hear it up as well. So I will start with a short round of introduction before we dive into the questions, and I will start with our virtual guest for today, which is Anne Branch, the head of Social and Inclusive Economy in the European Commission's Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion, or DG Employment. Even if I tried to learn that by heart, it's quite a long title. Welcome, Anne. But behind that long title, it's actually a person that has been with the European Commission, I think, since 1999, probably a time where not many women were there. So it would be interesting to also touch upon that topic, but that's not the topic for today. And I think one of the most important elements of what Anne will bring to light to us is actually the European perspective, or where we are heading with social economy. The European Commission is very involved in different instruments, especially working with intermediary organizations and financial instruments to really get European grants to the ground to social entrepreneurs. So we will explore all these options and what is really relevant and happening nowadays. The second person I will introduce is actually Peter Surek. He's the retail and social banker for 20 years in different CE markets. At the moment, also another long title, CEO of Erste Social Finance Holding, but also head of social banking in Erste Group.
Hello, good afternoon.
Welcome, Peter.
Thank you.
I think many of us who are here know the name Erste Group, especially when it comes to supporting social entrepreneurship and the social economy in the region. So we are very happy to have you here, and we are very eager to hear about some of the most recent innovations in the offer, not only with financial, but also with non-financial support that you are providing on the ground. Then I will move to my right side, Gabriela Gandel, the Managing Director of Impact Hub Global. I would say a leader who has been enabling many innovative organizations to actually thrive, always very committed to combining social good and environmental good in everything you do. Thank you for being here with us. You're kind of the voice of a global audience of social entrepreneurs, so very happy to hear what you have to say.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Welcome. And lastly, it is my pleasure to introduce Georg from Sign Time. It's actually one of the social enterprises I've had the chance to meet when I moved to Vienna for the first time. It's a software, a very intelligent software combining different technologies that is making it possible and affordable for translation into sign language. And the most interesting part was that actually Georg is very committed to working with deaf people and making it accessible for them not only to hear and engage with information, but also to have a very proper, dignified life and employment. So the social business and the innovative component are very interestingly combined in his social business. The first time I met you, I still remember you told me there is not one sign language. Actually, sign languages are very different and they go into even dialects, which is something I've never heard before and quite interesting to hear about. Welcome, Georg.
Thanks for the introduction. Hello.
So as you can tell, probably we already have quite an interesting coverage of all the layers, from the big picture to very much what's happening on the ground. And I will start, if you allow me, with the big picture. Please let your phones, questions, comments all the time, right? It's engagement on a high level, hopefully. But I will kick it off with a question to Anne. What is currently Europe doing when it comes to supporting the development of social economy? Is there anything that you would like to highlight and in short summarize, especially maybe in light also of the COVID-19 pandemic? Did that kick off something in a better direction or really not? Over to you, Anne. I'm very sorry, Anne, but we have a little bit of a technical glitch, as always at panels, right? We have to just make sure that we can hear you in the room. Can we test one more time?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Perfectly well.
Okay.
Over to you, Anne.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and I'm very happy to take part in this panel. Very sad I can't be there in person. It's not quite the same, but still, we have to make the best of things. So thank you for the question. I think the first point I want to make is that the social economy is really important to the European Union. And in fact, we're soon, in a few months' time, we're going to adopt a new policy strategy, so in December, on the social economy. So we're referring to it as the Social Economy Action Plan. And it's coming 10 years after the first initiative for the social economy, the Social Business Initiative in 2011. And so this is an important, this is going to be a really important policy document outlining, providing the framework for our policy work and future work for the coming years. Why is the social economy important to us? Well, I think Commissioner Schmidt already explained it well. I mean, we really, right from the beginning, after the financial crisis, I think there was more of a shift towards an understanding around and a wish to pursue ethical business, promote ethical business, and so social enterprise came to light, and it was realized that it's a good way to create jobs, to help people to integrate who've been unemployed for a long time or come from other disadvantaged groups. It creates social inclusion, and many of them are pursuing, providing services or products that contribute to sustainable development. And if anything, if I look at the context now compared to 2011, when we look at the increasing realization, we really have to do something about climate change, and we have to get serious about the sustainable development goals. And now you throw in the backdrop of the COVID pandemic, and growing inequalities. I think it's even more relevant. So I would say the impact of COVID is we were already planning this work for a number of years. We had hoped a couple of years ago already to come with a new strategy during this commission. But COVID has just proved it's all the more important. So we'll be coming with a new policy strategy, which we hope will resonate across Europe with all national governments, but also beyond Europe, because even though the scope is primarily for the European Union, many of the messages and reasons and ways of supporting social enterprises and the social economy are relevant beyond. And many of the tools and resources we've developed can also be tapped in on by countries or entities, intermediaries, organizations beyond Europe. So I realize I don't have much time, but I'd like to give you a quick insight of a few of the things we're doing more concretely. So perhaps I'll just say a few words on the kind of work we do to try to help policymakers improve the framework conditions in which social enterprises or social economy entities operate. Because we all know that it's not enough just, we know that all businesses need the right kind of administrative and legal frameworks. So we don't have any strong powers or competencies, but we can do a lot to help countries learn from each other and to speed up their understanding of what works and doesn't work, to get inspired from others. And this helps to speed up reforms and accelerate change in their countries. So an important part of our work in the past has been to develop tools to improve the evidence base, to improve the understanding of how policymakers can improve framework conditions and to speed up these reforms. We see a lot has been done. There's like 16 countries or so have strategies or frameworks in place now, but a lot more needs to be done. So that's one of the first things, and I won't go into all the details now. If anyone is interested, I can come back to that in the discussion. Now, the second area I wanted to focus on, and where my team has done a lot of work in the last 5 years, has been on improving access to finance. And of course, I think that's relevant to the panel today. So we've done a lot since 2015 with the EU funding programme for that period to put in place new instruments to boost lending and investment in social enterprises and the social economy. And we particularly targeted the small ticket range below 500,000 euros. The idea being we want to create more of these entities to start up and then scale up. But you can't scale up until you can start up. I should also have a caveat that we do a lot of microfinance, but I'm kind of focusing here now on the social enterprise discussion. We've tried very much to pursue a holistic kind of ecosystem approach. So, for example, we started with market-based financial instruments, which are managed for us through the European Investment Fund, and we have several of those. But we realized that this wasn't enough, that we, as well as developing the supply side, it was also important to develop the demand side and to assist with investment readiness. So we started to develop grant support one was to help try to promote new intermediaries across Europe to come up to provide access to finance. And the other was to try to support projects supporting the demand side, the investment readiness side. So we then, over time, we had various pilots, and then we saw that, in fact, we need to bring these two angles together. And so our last call for proposals, for example, tried to get the entities to bring the two aspects together. And I think that's what the project by Erste and the product launched today does very well. And I think it's good that Peter's in the panel. I know Peter relatively well over the years. Erste has made really interesting use of the instruments we have at the disposal. So the guarantees offered by the European Investment Fund, and then the grant support now that has helped to get this new quasi-equity instrument up and running. So I'm sure we'll come back to some of this in the discussion. So we've done a lot on access to finance. I can't really go into more detail now, I think. We have worked on other areas too, like trying to improve access to markets. So, for example, trying to boost the idea of socially responsible public procurement, because this is a very good entry point for social enterprises. And we've also tried to do work in relation to digitization and international dimension of social economy. But perhaps I'll leave it at that for now and see how the conversation carries on.
Thank you very much. I think you've made such an encompassing comment, and to really put this in 5 minutes, it's not very easy. So thank you for covering all the instruments and tools, and kind of already mentioning Peter and the work that is happening in Erste Group. I would like to go next to you. So we heard a little bit about the big picture. What is European Union and the Commission doing for this? How is the perspective from a financial institution like the one that you are leading? You say in the social banking that everyone or growth must be socially inclusive and can be socially inclusive. Mm-hmm. What are the elements and instruments that you are innovating on and offering at the moment that can help that?
Thank you. Thank you once again to be here. And thank you also, Anne, to see you after 2 years or so of not seeing each other. So I'm really happy to be in front of people finally, after lots of conferences, talking to a screen or to a camera. So what do we do? I mean, you probably know Erste and you know our programs in the markets. I think it's very diverse how the ecosystem looks like in East Europe and in West Europe. I think that's the first thing. So as you know, Erste is exposed to 6 markets directly in East European countries, and then we have our market in Austria. So if you look at what a financial institution can do, of course, it depends on what is happening on the ground, what is happening with new projects, with new institutions. And there are big differences between East and West Europe. You know, in West Europe, you have also large social institutions, large NGOs, large associations, large cooperatives, whom we don't have in East European markets. In West Europe, becoming a social entrepreneur is cool, and you can still live kind of with that. In East Europe, it's more difficult because also the whole subsidy level is on a different scale than in West European markets. Also, the purchase power of people to buy your products, of course, is different in East European countries than in West European markets. So many business models which function in West Europe don't necessarily function in East Europe. So it's more challenging environment. And it was also challenging to convince the bank to kind of finance these kind of new strange enterprises and non-profits. in the countries. And I think what helped very much was also the guarantee, which was provided by European Commission and basically facilitated by European Investment Fund, which enabled us to start with lending. And this was a big step forward, because the questions which we got at the beginning was actually how we can lend to non-profit or to social enterprises if they don't make money. How do they repay the loan? So it was a difficult process, but I think now since we started already approximately 8 years ago, we are behind this phase, and we are really proud and happy that we could finance around 1,000 projects of social enterprises, disburse more than 100 million euros of loans for these entities. And now what we launch actually today is actually a quasi-equity, because we have seen that especially after COVID crisis, many social businesses are lacking equity. So we can't finance them because they don't have sufficient capital. So that's why we start with this quasi-equity offering in collaboration with Impact Hub, who is providing very much needed capacity building for the clients. And also thanks to the grant from European Commission, we can provide this for free through the Impact Hub network across all the countries. I mean, what we see is that many social enterprises don't have very good financial planning. And actually, this is where the experts from Impact Hub are coming into the play to develop a long-term liquidity and cash flow planning for the clients so that we can finance them based on that. So I'll probably stop here. Of course, we also offer additional capacity building programs. Our foundation is running an NGO academy in the region, which supports especially the non-profits to become larger and more effective. So we do lots of things, but I'll also leave the space for the other speakers.
Thank you very much. Sounds very interesting and exciting that actually at this panel we are launching a new instrument that would be now available to social entrepreneurs across the region. And Impact Hub was already mentioned in the story, so I will just go next to Gabriela. And maybe I will put the question not so much around this concrete instrument, but from your experience, especially in the past 2 years. How is it like to be a social entrepreneur? What do you see from the network and all the hubs across the world?
Well, it's been a tough 2 years, right? I'm sure that the audience here and online can resonate with that. Not only because of being a social entrepreneur, it's because being an entrepreneur in this particular economy and society is quite difficult. We currently work with about 24,000 entrepreneurs globally a year. And out of them, at the beginning of the pandemic, there were already the first reports. I remember one from the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneur already saying that about 60% will disappear on the back of the pandemic. Now, the good news is they did not disappear on the back of the pandemic. Actually, just about 10% were significantly affected in the sense of having to stop their operations and potentially pivot into another career or maybe another business, right? So that's the good news. In a way, the entrepreneurial spirit has built on the crisis and managed to pivot through and come back. And what I believe was appreciated from the instruments mentioned, definitely the access to finance components. We all know that, and in particularly those that are guaranteed, so there's a bit lesser levy on the individuals, and obviously they're weak business models at this point in time. However, the piece that I feel is still missing and a lot of our entrepreneurs are talking about is access to market. So we love the loans, we love the guaranteed loans, we love the quasi-equity for sure, but we need to repay them, right? And the environment is very difficult for revenue generation, right? And so what we would focus on and what a lot of our entrepreneurs had to focus on is how to access markets when you can't access them anymore in the usual way, when you maybe don't have the technical capabilities to go digital very easily. Not all of them have the resources for fancy tech very easily, right? And so on and so forth. So what we applaud is very much the public procurement initiative from the EU that's been highly appreciated, and a number of corporates that have opened their own supply and value chains and are starting to look at social enterprises as potential replacement into those supply and value chains. But we need to do much more around access to market. And if I were to put my money on where our entrepreneurs would like help today, is on access to markets, more so than on anything else.
Thank you, Gabriela. Georg, what a nice transition to you. We all three talk about what is needed to develop, to scale social economy. There are so many instruments we hear about, but how is it really to be a social entrepreneur and run an enterprise? Are these instruments valuable? What helped you the most on the journey?
Yes, sure, of course, all these instruments are valuable, and we need all them, and I think, especially our company, we used all of them. So we started about 10 years ago with national financed R&D grants, and then after that we produced something like proof of concept, proof of market, and after that we went further on development, made it a little bit bigger, and we got funded by EU R&D funds, and that gave us a big push forward and helped us to settle up really a product. And this is, I think, that is really a critical phase, because when we ran out of the grants, we had to gain money on the market. So it's because investors and banks and all that institutions that give you money, they expect that they get the money back. This is very opposite to the grants. And so you have to produce to the market. This is not only bad, because if you have to bring a minimum viable product into the market, then you will get something. If you don't have this, and I see this with a lot of R&D projects we do with universities and non-university R&D companies and so on, they produce a lot of paper, a lot of knowledge, but no products and nothing valuable on the market. So we had the pressure to bring a product to the market, and we did it. And then, even then, it becomes very hard, because if you're used to have big amounts of big funds of grants for R&D, and then you start with the small amounts what you gain from the market, very small revenues, then and you have a big staff, so this is a gap of money, and then the challenge is to close this gap. And therefore, you need equity, or equity very close to equity money, like the money we got from the Erste Bank. I think we were one of the first project pilots from the first. The first, okay, yeah. We are always the first. We're used to that, and this is very helpful, because if you get money like that, you become more interesting for other investors. So the first investment is the hardest. Like you say, the first million is the hardest, but we are not at that point. But the first investment is hard, and if you get financed by the first investor, then the next investor sees, okay, you are checked. There are a lot of people, they checked out your numbers and your market size and your product and your technology and your IPRs and so on, and then it becomes easier. That's what we experienced in this process. Yeah. But we are not at the end. After the first round and pilot with the Erste Bank, we directly went to the next impact investor, and we're in very good negotiations, and we're on the last mile of that process.
Oh, congrats. Very happy to hear that. Thank you for this answer. And I think it goes in very much the direction of, yes, we are doing the right steps, and there is a lot more to be done. And I want to remind at this moment the audience that is live with us in the venue, but also the online audience, to please check and scan your QR codes. I think that's the safest way to get to Slido. I already have one question that I think is more pointed to Anne, or as a moderator, I'll choose to point it to you. And everyone else in the speaker panel who is inspired by it can also join. But for everyone else, another encouragement and invitation, please do share your comments, thoughts, questions in Slido using the QR code. Works better than the hashtag. That's what I was told from backstage. Tip. So, Anne, are there any plans to offer solutions to align the policy regulation in different countries of the European Union to make it easier? Sorry, my tablet just went off. To make it easier to speed up innovation, especially social innovation in EU.
Sorry, can you read it out again?
Are there any plans to offer solutions to align the policy regulation in different countries in order to enable speeding up innovation in EU?
If the question concerns harmonizing regulations and rules, then no. But there are a number of things we want to do to help social innovation, whether it's through funding support, through, for example, through the kind of social impact instruments that I've been in charge of. But there are many sources of funding for social innovation type of things. And in the action plan that we're publishing in December, we'll touch upon social innovation and try with some of the new things we want to do as the EU. But harmonizing regulations, no.
Maybe I'll go to Gabriela then. What are, how limiting are regulations around social entrepreneurship in the countries where, let's say in the region, Central Eastern Europe, you have hubs, I think, almost in all the countries of Central Eastern Europe. How much the regulation influences the development and scaling of the social economy?
Actually, we've had research just on this topic happening over this year and the previous year in Hungary, Romania, Czech Republic, and we also included Ukraine and Turkey as well, which are not part of the EU, but obviously connected as ecosystems. And unfortunately, the regulations are way behind in Eastern Europe compared to the other countries on the social economy. Even though some of the countries even have laws around the social economy, they're not implemented. Romania, for example, is one of them. There's a big regulation about it. It's in the law. Supposedly, organizations can become social enterprises and be seen and have the legal status and have a legal entity that's a social enterprise. And there are very few of them, if any, who ever became one, because it's actually more bureaucracy to become this and less validation because it's an untrusted form, right? It's not a validated form. Investors don't know it. Public institutions don't know it. Foundations don't know it. Corporations don't know it, right? So even in those where there is regulation, it's much more at an idea stage rather than a real support on the ground. What, however, it has helped with is the recognition of the social economy as an important player. So it's more of a general symbolism that we are there, we're important. Policymakers are starting to think about it and create some level of regulations that could help. But the actual practical regulations in Eastern Europe are not yet supportive. And in fact, are seen more of a burden by the entrepreneurs than a support. So they're only using them sometimes to access EU funding because it's a helpful connection. Sorry to say, Anne, but I'm sure you know this. But in practice, it doesn't improve their ability to do their businesses, right? So they will also have hybrid other legal forms that they have in their consortium to be able to access other types of instruments from tax benefits or other such on the ground, right? So currently, it is quite a big disparity and is not the biggest help. I think access to finance initiatives are more helpful right now than the policy regulations. But it's a way to see that we are being recognized and we're becoming important, right? So I know that some of the policymakers have showed up at the research conversations, at the policy forums, and they're willing to reconsider their framework. So we have a chance and we are more recognized. I would take it like that. It's a step forward, but it's not yet the main reason why social enterprises thrive in the region, no.
And what would be the main reason they thrive in the region?
Because they're entrepreneurs, right? So they will make it happen, right? I believe the culture and the talent that's coming into the sector is better and better, and that is a big factor. But I would also say corroborated with the access to finance initiatives. They have been very helpful either from Erste or from other public or private organizations that have started to pour investment into the sector, and either inspired by the West or by other models, they're seeing it as an important player. So I think those two, the talent that's coming into the sector and the access to finance initiatives. And the last piece, we're having better and better intermediaries in the region as well, right? So there's more intermediaries, there are more competent intermediaries as well. There's better research that informs the quality of the intermediary support. So I would say that maybe is the third ingredient that's helpful in Central Eastern Europe these days.
Thank you, Gabriela. Anne, did I see your hand raised? You wanted to add something before I go to the next question?
Just to chip in, that indeed, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Yeah, that legal frameworks aren't necessarily a panacea. It's if they're done well, that matters. So sometimes, I mean, in principle, it's good if these legal forms are recognized, definitely. But if, for example, too many burdens are then introduced, it can backfire. And social entrepreneurs will be entrepreneurial and just find the legal form that allows them to do what they want. But this is where the EU, the kind of work we do is to try to help countries and policymakers to give them better tools to understand how they can improve the kind of regulatory framework. So whether we have a better entrepreneurship policy tool that they can use, it's online, it's really designed for policymakers. With the OECD, we finance country reviews of some countries of their ecosystems. So we hope that, so I absolutely agree, it's not a panacea, but we think through learning through each other and what works and doesn't work, the EU can help to speed up policymakers' understanding and hopefully help to improve the national frameworks. But they're very diverse and the countries are very diverse.
We have also one comment from the audience coming on this topic. In Portugal, the legal forms are very restrictive and inflexible, and that has a huge impact even in our ability, social and climate startups, to deliver value. Thank you, Laura, for that comment. I think it very much feeds into the conversation we have here. And now I will move to the next question that we have from the audience. What are the minimum requirements to receive the Erste Equity Boost? I think, Peter, this question will go to you. And then, Georg, you can talk about the experience a little bit more from being the first user.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to maybe add one more thing regarding the previous question, because we have now kind of an experience since the last 2 years. Slovakia introduced a law on social entrepreneurship, and we have made probably the mistake to be somehow the single point of contact for the grants, because suddenly there are thousands of social enterprises who would like to get the grants from the government. So of course, when the regulation is established and there are certain grant components, you suddenly have so many social enterprises who are willing to take the grants. So I think it also then requires certain time until the market cleans up and until really the true and genuine social enterprises will get the support. So it's always, I think, very also difficult for the public sector to somehow design the instruments in the way that it can really not be misused, and it's used really by the right players. I mean, we see it also regarding the public tenders for financial intermediaries. I mean, now we have lost the tender where we have applied in Slovakia because we have provided realistic figures on the impacts which we can really generate, and we are sure that we can generate. But of course, if somebody else say they can do 10 times with the same money, and they put it on the paper, then they won the tender. So it's also not very easy for Anne and for the teams in the local countries to design the instruments in the way really to have the best leverage from private sector, to have the best impact with the minimum money coming from the public sector. So that's just to add on this side. And regarding the requirements, I mean, for the quasi-equity, so what we offer in all the markets basically is lending. So that's established through local social banking units of our banks. So all the social enterprises and non-profits who need financing and have certain history of at least 2 years can come to the bank and basically ask for financing. When it comes to the quasi-equity, that's actually primarily focused on social businesses or non-profits who have low equity, which basically disables them to get additional financing from the banks or from other financiers. So it should actually act as a kind of a catalyzer for additional funding. What we can finance is basically growth, scale up. We can finance digitalization, offering new products, new services. It can be also recovery from COVID impacts, which many of our enterprises have. And actually what we see is not only the impact on the enterprises which are naturally hit by COVID, like hubs, for instance, right? Or event organizations or gastro-tourism, but also actually many other social enterprises are being now kind of concerned and insecure about the future. So they are actually scaling down their activities and their investments. So we would like to also encourage them somehow to scale, because we believe now is the time. Now will be lots of funding coming from European Union, also through the multilateral financial framework. So there will be lots of funding available, and I think social enterprises and non-profits should kind of get use of that and basically grow and be able to provide the impact. With regard to the concrete conditions, you need to have a proven business case, so you need to reach certain kind of financial sustainability. And with regards to the topics we can finance, as mentioned, growth of social businesses, but also social real estate projects. So like a small social housing project, if you build a facility for care, which is very much needed in many countries. So this can be also financed. So it's both basically real estate projects where we can finance up to 1 million euros, and then social business growth where we usually finance up to 500,000. Plus on the top, our local banks can provide additional lending. So the total kind of amounts can be up to 5 million euros. That's a very high level information, but we have a stand there. So if you are interested, you can go there, and there is my colleague Florian who will give you all the information.
And I think Georg, sitting next to you as the first user, can also explain a little bit what's the nitty-gritty details of getting into this.
Yep.
And maybe also to touch upon a little bit your employment policies, because I know your team is also highly diverse, very connected to the beneficiaries that you serve. So did that help? Did this kind of instruments help in, I don't know, expanding your team, HR costs, operational costs, etc.?
Yeah, first of all, we are very far away from the 5 million. We got a smaller loan, but was very good. It is a loan, how you call it, nachrangig, you know.
Subordinated loan.
Subordinated, thanks. And this is within your balance sheet. This is like gold. Yeah, thanks.
Yes,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
good.
It's equity. Yeah. So that helps a lot. The conditions. So as we were the first customer for you in this, I think we together developed the conditions for the next customers. I think it's not rocket science. For those of you which are familiar with getting fundings from public funds, which knows how to write a proposal for EU fundings or also national fundings, they know what about storytelling, how to tell your story of social impact, how to describe your social impact within your product, and so you should do it. But of course, there are two conditions for that special kind of financing you need. One is you need a very high social impact, and not just tell about the social, you have to show it. You have to show it in numbers if you can, in figures, and so on. And it's not just, yes, and we have a little bit of social impact as well. You really need a social impact. And the second is you need a valid business case. I know from other companies, a lot of social companies come out from the non-profit sector or from something like that. So they have different culture. They have different background, and they're not so used with these instruments of financing. So in this case, you have to get familiar with that. You have to write business plannings, and you have to learn about business planning. So you should have this. In our case, as I told before, we had to be on the market in a very very early stage, because we had to finance the not granted part of our costs. So it was not so a big change for us to go into that. And the second question was about our staffing. So yeah, our employees are very close to our target group in the market. So we have about 40% of our employees are deaf, and they are in all on all points of the production. So there are deaf translators, we have deaf 3D animators, so they use the animator software, and we also have a software developer which is deaf. So, and the quality check is also made by a deaf translator. So we have in all parts of our production and in the design, we have deaf people, and this is in our case, it's very important, because we have to produce something which can be used by deaf people. And if the people who designed it do not include the deaf people into the design work at the beginning, then the outcome will be very worse, and we know this from some other projects. Even Microsoft failed with a sign language avatar they created something together with a Chinese university, and it didn't work. And I think it didn't work because they didn't engage deaf people in there. So even the use cases were very unuseful for deaf people. That's yeah.
Very useful tip, definitely, and practical also kind of experience. We are now receiving quite a lot of questions from the audience. Thank you, keep it coming. I'll really make sure that by the end of the panel we try to answer all of them. And I'll go to Gabriela now. Dedicated social entrepreneurship, about 10%, there are many, so about the 10% of social businesses that suffered during Corona. Do you see any patterns of what do they have in common? And what are some of the plans to help them that maybe Impact Hub has, or what has worked in helping them already?
So the 10% I mentioned are the ones that actually closed down over the pandemic, right? So they didn't just suffer. They're the ones that actually had to close down and potentially pivot significantly to a whole new business or out of business, right? And most of those had problems before. The pandemic was just a catalyzer of the end, unfortunately. And the problems before are basically two. It was a problem of talent, so the people, the organizational back end, whether they were capable, whether they were strong and prepared for resilience, right? Or financing. Their financials were already drained out, they didn't have enough investment, they hadn't managed the finances well before, and they usually had some level of governance issues. That means shareholders' issues, or other types of investor shareholder issues, which of course in a crisis get escalated 10 times. So I would say these are the three patterns why they had to close down. Very few of them had to close down because obviously they couldn't deliver their service anymore to their community. So they mostly were in food businesses, and then they just had to close down for the time being. But for those, it's primarily that they are dormant and they're rebuilding in a different direction, or they reuse their assets into a creative way. So they were a community kitchen and now they are a deposit for something else, right? So those are more creative about it. I would say those are the cases mostly, and even in Impact Hubs, right? We've had Impact Hubs, we had 2 Impact Hubs that closed down as a result of the pandemic of 102, and we're also a social business, right? And even in those, the patterns are the same. It's a mix of people issues, money, and shareholder trouble, right? So if you had those and a crisis came, you were not ready for resilience. You couldn't pivot, you couldn't align, and you didn't have resources to pivot at that time.
Very interesting patterns.
I can add something there. So basically, what I would just like to offer to the social enterprises here, or maybe also those ones who are watching us. I mean, we have also education or capacity building or consulting support for our clients, which is available in almost basically all of our countries. So if you would need certain kind of support or help, please turn to us. We have additionally also launched already in May last year, together with our foundation, a special kind of liquidity emergency loan program, where actually Erste Foundation is covering the interest payment. So actually the loan is for free for the social enterprises and non-profits. So of course they need to be kind of eligible for the funding from Erste Foundation. So we need to assess every case separately. But we have also this kind of support for the market, for the players who are there around, because we see the situation. We see that many were hindered in doing their activity. And we also had many actually social enterprises who were actually active in tourism. They were having their pensions, they were having their shops. Yeah. All this was basically shut down during the crisis. So please, if you have any kind of need for consulting, for help, please turn to our colleagues in the countries and we'll try to help you the best we can.
Thank you for that call to action. I'll now move to a question to Anne, and please listen to it carefully. It's an interesting question. Should the EU think and act more like a startup, entrepreneurial itself, and take more risk in funding more startups with social and ecological value actively?
Yeah, interesting, quirky question. Well, Marina Mazzucati, who the academic you may have heard of, would argue not to underestimate the entrepreneurial capacity of the state and public bodies. So, so I hear the kind of implication behind it. of course, we are a public service, but I think we do try to think as much as possible in an entrepreneurial and innovative way as an administration. Okay, it's a bit different to be in a startup. We manage public funds and we're there to support businesses. But one of the great things about EU money is that we can often, we can pilot things. And for example, the kind of grant funding that my unit has launched in the last 5 years was very innovative in terms of creating new instruments. So I think Peter can concur that the kind of instrument now that's got off the ground, that was helped by the kind of pilot funding, grant funding we provided. We're also, I can give a concrete example. We're also being quite innovative with another pilot we launched. I refer to it shorthand as inclusive incubators, but we've launched basically a pilot through grant funding where we wanted to experiment with the idea that as there is this big demand for investment readiness, and we'd done a lot on the supply side of access to finance, we wanted to try to find a systemic way and more innovative way to do something to boost investment readiness, knowing that we don't have the capacity to fund lots of small projects across Europe. So what we did was we launched a call for a consortium, bringing together different European level networks to try to get mainstream incubators to incorporate social and inclusive entrepreneurship support into their offering. So that, I think, is an example of us really trying to be innovative and thinking outside of the box. So I would say in the defense of civil servants that we can be very innovative and creative. And I, for example, the European Social Fund, over the last 7-year period, it's provided 1 billion euros of money roughly to help countries develop their social enterprise and social economy ecosystems. And it's been a game changer in some Central and East European countries. So anyway, it's not a complete answer, but hopefully it gives you a little bit of an insight into how we're perhaps not as dull and boring as people would think we are always.
Thank you, Anne.
Because Impact Hub is actually part of the consortium that's working on the
exactly.
inclusive incubators and accelerators together with EBN and a number of other big networks. And it's true, there is space, but we also need to have the right expectations of the EU, right? You are the regulators, you are providing frameworks and enabling us, and there's a dialogue happening. And I was very pleased to see the openness around, in particular, this initiative and the focus. And that's very important to remember in the social economy, particularly as we're going to scale. And I really do believe we are at a phase where we're going to become more important and more at scale, but not to forget the inclusive component, right? So we were here to show a different way of doing business where vulnerable groups also get the economic opportunity, not only as beneficiaries, but also as entrepreneurs themselves and as active players in the economic model. And I think this is what this initiative is trying to do for women, for refugees, for migrants, for youth, and for the elderly, and also for people with disabilities, which is fantastic. And I would very much applaud that initiative and have a lot of optimism from what we can do there together.
To add to what you actually just mentioned, I think what also Anne didn't mention is actually the whole regulatory work which is being done is also pushing existing enterprises to be more social, to be more impact focused, to be more green. And
Absolutely.
I think there the big impact lies, because I think we need to move the giants. And I think with the recent initiatives which were launched, like the European Green Deal, you are moving the giants, and very strongly. And I mean, who would have dreamed of 5 years ago that Volkswagen would say that we will not produce kind of petrol cars in 2030? So I think maybe it's too early still, or too late for some organizations, but this nobody would have dreamed of a couple of years ago. So I think this regulatory power which you are exercising over the whole kind of large corporate SME sector, I think is very powerful, because we need lots of small innovative startups, but we also need the big players. And I'm happy that Erste, we were able to move a bit into this space, but we need to move also other banks. We need to move other large corporations into this area of impact, so that the whole kind of Europe can change, because this can happen only also with big players being involved.
Happy that this question inspired such an entrepreneurial spirit on stage as well. So thank you for all the support and additional comments. Many other questions are coming in. If we don't manage to answer all of them, I really will invite all the panelists to go to Slido right after we finish and answer some of those questions, because there are some very concrete questions around patterns in entrepreneurial behavior, for example, connected to closing social businesses, and also a few other around the instruments that maybe would be easier to answer in written. But I will go to Georg now. There is one very interesting question about what, there are many bottlenecks for social businesses in the funding gap between ideation and MVP. So minimum viable product. How can we fund bold ideas that have not been validated yet? What was your experience in actually moving from idea to minimum viable product, and what helped you most at this stage?
Yeah. So in our case, the MVP was the result of the R&D financing. If you cannot produce an MVP, then you don't have any product, and then it's really hard to get an additional financing. So the target, the goal of an R&D finance project should be an MVP. Otherwise, you have the 3 Fs, you know them, but it's very hard, because you are too early staged for any institutional investor, and maybe you are too far away for a R&D investor. So try to get at least an MVP at the end of your R&D project.
Thank you for that answer. And I will also connect it to another question that comes around what kind of support can social entrepreneurs expect from the hub or other intermediary organizations when they are at that stage? So MVP, moving to MVP.
It's funny because as you were answering, there's a very nice initiative. I'll bring it from Taiwan this time. We have an impact hub there. And the legislator is actually quite progressive around the social economy in Taiwan for quite some time. And one way they help in this stage is they've actually accredited a number of intermediaries that can distribute grants from public grants via intermediaries just for that research and development, not through financial institutions, not directly from the public institutions, but through intermediaries that are much closer to the entrepreneurs and can help them not only do the ideation phase, but with the capacity building that you were mentioning earlier, with the skills and everything else that's needed, the operational setup in that phase before MVP. And that model is happening in a number of hubs. They have incubators and accelerators, also for idea stage specifically. We do about 240 of them a year around the globe, and oftentimes they are international. So also for Austrian entrepreneurs, you don't have to just apply in Vienna, although yes, please do apply in Vienna. I can see the wink in Alexis's eye, apply in Vienna. But actually we have impact hubs all across the DACH region, or even we have Accelerate 2030, which is an international accelerator that also works with early stage ideation validation. Oftentimes in this, it's called a format that we often do is called the business model challenge, which is you have an idea, but can it work in the market? And that's the real question of that intervention, and it's a mix of skills, funding, mentorship, peer-to-peer learning, oftentimes in a structured 3 to 6 months intervention.
Thank you, Gabriela. We have around 10 more minutes left, so I want to turn to the audience in the room. Maybe some of you already posted questions in Slido, and I don't want to be too intimidating, but if anyone feels like speaking up and making your voice heard, would you like to get a mic and comment or question or post any kind of suggestion to our panel? Okay, I'm comfortable with silence, although I talk too much. Alexis, you have a question to the panel. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I have a question to Peter, because back in the days I used to be a banker who did not believe in banks anymore and impact. Peter, you said that Erste Bank has been doing a lot of steps, and we know that in the social banking, you guys have been really innovative, and a lot has happened in that sector. How is it with the rest of the bank? Is the rest of the bank also ready to push other giants, or what's happening in that field?
That's an interesting question. And we see one bank kind of following us, which is also present on Austrian market and actually has also the name of Austria in their name. But I will not name the bank. So we see them kind of following the direction actually which we have started and very much kind of doing things which we believe are right and which we also do. For the rest, we don't see it so far. I mean, what we see so far is different kind of CSR activities. Okay, we finance this one NGO, we finance this one nice social enterprise, then we make a kind of campaign around it, but we don't bring it to the real business. And because that's the difficult thing, because imagine you have a big bank, which is like a big factory, like a car factory. You know, everything is efficiently set up there. So the things go, the project goes, the product goes through the line, and everybody knows to do with it. Now there is a social enterprise. Nobody knows what to do with it, and bringing this into the business is very difficult because you need to change the whole process. You need to talk with tens of people, tens of departments who are running this whole kind of lending process in the banks, up to the regulators who are also not so much keen sometimes, you know, to see this kind of risky, in their view, portfolio. So there are multiple components to it. So it's a very difficult process, and not many banks are taking the effort to go into this direction. But we see, of course, at the same time through the regulation and push for ESG that more banks are looking at the impact of their financing on the green side, but also on the social side. I mean, many times now it's still a ticking exercise. Okay, this is done. So it's more like being compliant than to do the impact, but I believe it will come. I have a hope that somehow many banks will jump into this. I mean, we see also many alternative investors. We see the banks which are more like West European banks, the ethical banks or social banks, which were founded in 70s, 80s, who are basically doing this activity as we do on their territory. So I have a hope it will be more and more also competition for us so that we can get also better in what we are doing, but also more opportunities for social enterprises and non-profits to get financing in the region.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the audience one more time before I turn into the last question for today. Okay, we have the next question.
Got it.
So with the question, when I look at the ESG, and you mentioned the ESG in general, and we do a yearly survey about the motivation about asset owners turning into the ESG. And we might not believe it, but it's still regulation. So it's not the commitment, it's not the responsibility, it's still regulation. So my question generally to the panel speaker, if we see that ESG is just driven and pushed by regulation, does it mean that we should also push the impact into regulation so that we have to have a report, a measurement, so in order to push and drive the impact economy we want to see?
Perfect question for a closing panel. So who wants to go first? I see Georg.
Maybe I can start with that, yes. We experienced that in Germany they have very strong regulation about accessibility of web content. So this is exactly what we need. And we make our best business we do is in Germany because of that regulation. So it's simply not a law, it's something below a law, but because of that regulation, every state, every governmental company, organization, or institution has to be in a minimum accessible on their website. So in our case, they have at least to provide 2 videos in German Sign Language, and it's not a lot, but because there are very many companies, institutions, and customers for us, it makes really sense. So if you bring the need of accessibility or other social impact into the regulation, that drives a lot of business into the social business industry, I think.
Thank you for that answer. And would you like to give it a try as well?
Well, what I would say is I would draw your attention to the sustainable finance strategy, the renewed sustainable finance strategy that was adopted by the Commission in July. Invite you all to look at that. It's a public document. And that outlines the Commission's intentions to go further in terms of promoting sustainable finance. And that includes a range of work on ESG. So I'd invite you to check that out. So there will be more things will be coming. The Commission itself is also carrying on with the taxonomy, sustainable finance taxonomy, which covers climate and environment. And towards the end of this year, in principle, the Commission will also report on whether it should be extended to social. So it's a space that is going to be very, very important in the coming years. This new strategy, the original strategy, sustainable finance strategy, was from 2018, but with the new Commission and its new European Green Deal, there's more ambition, and the Commission wants to go further. So it's an evolving space. It recognises that we are further than a few years ago. We all the time, every day in the FT, you see articles on ESG funds and impact investing, and the whole issue of greenwashing, social washing comes up as well, and the need for some kind of way of measuring or common measurement tools. And so I think this is a space that is going to evolve in the coming years. So I would perhaps leave that at that and invite you all to look at the sustainable finance strategy that was adopted in July.
Thank you. Gabriela, any words from you?
Well, it's reciprocal, right? So if social entrepreneurs are expected to measure the impact and deepen that measurement, and I've been in plenty forums where there's a lot of work for us to have to deepen our work, I expect that the other parties who are investing in this social economy should also over time deepen their own impact measurement, right? And I think your question is loaded and I can see you're nodding. So yes, I think it's reciprocal. We can't just have the burden on the small and medium enterprises that are in this sector, but the burden needs to be on the big players as well to rigorously look at their impact and not just comply with the regulations.
Yeah, from our perspective, we believe we have enough regulation for banking sector, so that's normally the answer, from the banks, because really it's like hundreds of people who are just working in our bank on regulation. And some kind of an example, ECB stress test, it's 10,000 pages, which we need to print and send to ECB. Just for you to know like how much regulation the bank already have. So that's why I see that this would imply that it's only about financing, which is the issue. But I see also the pipeline generation, somehow the new ideas and development of social enterprises and development of the ecosystem, which still would need to be developed. So we are happy to publish, and we are publishing actually our impact report. But I don't believe this would be a kind of now magic solution that would solve all the problems which are around. So I believe it also needs to change of the people, because it's every time. If you have a person who just wants to find a way around, he will always find a way around. If you have a person who has integrity on the top positions, and I think this we need to call for, that we have really people in leadership positions who have integrity and who see a bit broader picture of the world than just their own enterprise and their own profit.
Thank you very much for all your inputs and for all the inspiring courage and boldness that you took, especially seeing at the development of the field from back 10 years back till today. I think we have still a lot more work to do, but with people like you sitting next on the stage, I mean, not sitting here, but sitting in where you do the actual work, I'm confident that a lot more is coming, and scaling is possible, and impact is possible, and transforming the economy is possible. Thank you also to the audience for being interactive, engaging. A lot more provocative questions are still available on Slido. I really invite the panelists, if you have the chance, just connect and try to reply in a written form. And thank you, everyone. A round of applause for our speakers.
So after this first session that already touched upon a lot of the different dimensions that we will be focusing on during the next 2 days, it's time for a coffee break to refuel and to mingle. But it's also time for you to decide which next session you would like to attend. Here in the studio, we will host a hybrid session on impact measurement and management, so really touching upon what has just been said. In the library, you can join for the beta launch of our impact marketplace, WeBeam, and discussing how to create that market for social entrepreneurs that Georg mentioned at the beginning of the panel. And finally, as a treat for our live audience, you can also exclusively join the session happening in the atrium, where our partner Erste Bank will be discussing the social impact bond that they, together with the social ministry, have created. But before you do all that, it's time to grab a coffee. If you're here, join me in the cafe area. If you're at home, grab a coffee in the comfort of your own home. And then let's meet back here at 5:30, and let's meet back in your sessions, hybrid in the studio and in the library and live in the atrium. See you soon.